In September 2001, terrorists flew planes into the Twin Towers in New York, and journalists and diplomats around the world were suddenly thinking about little else. Then Isaias made his move. In a series of dawn raids, his security forces arrested every member of the G15 and Asmara at the time, bar one, who recanted. Returning from a health checkup in America, Mesfin Hagos, the defense minister, learned while in transit through Frankfurt Airport that his passport had been revoked. He'd been rendered stateless. Unable to board the flight to Asmara, he went into exile in Germany. None of the people arrested has been seen since. More than half are believed to have died in prison. Isaias's ruthless handling of the men and women he'd fought alongside heralded a new phase of his rule. Soon afterwards, he shut down independent media. Many churches, seen as magnets for dissent, were hounded underground, and no's were encouraged to leave. In an echo of Mao's anti-intelligentsia campaigns, Asmara's university was shut down and replaced with military-run technical colleges. The most serious consequence of the border war was the introduction of open-ended military service. Eritreans of both sexes were obliged to abandon their studies and family farms to go and drill in Sawa, a bleak desert training camp. Having learned to become soldiers, they were used as camouflage-clad laborers, digging wells in the baking heat and building roads on pitiful state allowances. This system, which some have likened to slavery, is still in place. The forced labor can last for years. There is no time limit. Those who resist are arrested. Many have fled the country. Human Rights Watch puts the number of immigrants at 1/10 of the entire population, but no one can be sure. Having been trounced in a border war, Isaias pursued proxy wars farther afield. After Ethiopia sent troops into Somalia in 2006 to take on Al-Shabaab, a jihadist group, Isaias entered the conflict on the jihadists' side. This doomed Eritrea to nearly a decade of Unsecurity Council sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans on the PFDJ, the Red Sea Trading Corporation, and the armed forces. The opprobrium rankled, but Isaias refused to engage in the diplomatic dances that might unlock foreign aid, and pulled out of regional coordination bodies because, his critics said, he couldn't dominate them. He rarely agreed to meet visiting dignitaries or foreign ambassadors, unless they were Chinese. The Chinese embassy in Asmara, according to US Cable, sent Isaias a meal once a month. Eritrean troops stand accused of killing Tigrayan civilians sheltering in churches, using women for months as sex slaves, setting fire to crops, slaughtering livestock, and pillaging businesses. With the doors of the presidential office closed, Western diplomats resorted to clumsy stereotypes when analyzing this complex, deeply private head of state. In a cable from 2008, published on WikiLeaks, the American ambassador was quoted describing Isaias as unhinged. But predictions that he would become irrelevant proved premature. The beginning of the end of Isaias's wilderness years came in 2012 with Meleza's relatively early death from blood cancer. Bereft of its brilliant leader, the increasingly unpopular TPLF began to lose its grip on Ethiopia's ruling coalition, itself undermined by growing unrest among the Oromo and Amhara ethnic groups. When Abiy Ahmed, a former intelligence officer of mixed Oromo and Amhara descent, was eventually appointed prime minister, he made it his business to repair relations with Eritrea, while purging TPLF members from senior posts in the military and security establishment. Humiliated and facing prosecution, they retreated to Tigray, their home province. In July 2018, a crowd gathered in the fierce sunshine at Addis Ababa airport to watch a plane land. Its touchdown heralded the end of a two-decade standoff between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Cameramen scurried across the tarmac as the doors opened to capture the moment Isaias set foot on Ethiopian soil. A brass band struck up as the president strode down the red carpet. Some people began to dance. For Eritrean viewers, the fact that Isaias was visiting Ethiopia for the first time in 22 years wasn't what kept them glued to their TV screens. What transfixed them was his smile. As the 6 feet 3 inches Eritrean stooped to embrace Abiy Ahmed, more than 30 years his junior and 7 inches shorter, Isaias seemed close to tears of joy. When a crowd greeted him with ululations later that day, his face, normally set in a look of stern resolve beneath its impressive mustache, dissolved in a grin. When Abiy handed him the keys to Eritrea's dust-blanketed embassy in Addis Ababa, the man sometimes described as Africa's Kim Jong-un positively beamed. "None of us had seen anything like it before," says Hebert Burhe, his former ambassador. His face was completely changed. Everyone was wondering what it meant. Subsequent events have cast that trip, and that smile, in a new light. On the surface, reconciliation was the order of the day, with the visit paving the way for a series of peace deals between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Abiy would go on to receive the Nobel Peace Prize for his role. But analysts now wonder whether Isaias and Abiy actually struck a war pact, with the TPLF as the allotted victim. In a speech the same month, Isaias made clear that, in his view, it was game over for the loathed Wayne, as the TPLF are known in Eritrea. In November 2020, after the TPLF insisted on staging an election Abiy had cancelled in the rest of the country, Ethiopia's federal army and Tigrayan fighters went to war. Isaias sent Eritrean troops to help his new friend smash his old enemy. For the first 5 months, Abiy covered up the Eritrean role in the fighting, but eventually it became impossible to deny. Isaias, we now know, not only ordered his own forces across the border into Tigray, he also trained a contingent of Somali soldiers who followed them and allowed imported drones to be stationed in the Eritrean port of Assab. The war claimed between 160,000 and 380,000 civilian lives, by one estimate. Every side committed atrocities, some ghoulishly recorded on smartphones and posted on social media. But it is striking just how many abuses have been attributed to Eritrean soldiers. Most of these troops, like Isaias, speak Tigrinya. Some have distant family in Tigray. Yet Eritrean troops stand accused of killing Tigrayan civilians sheltering in churches, using women as sex slaves, setting fire to crops, slaughtering livestock and pillaging businesses in what appears to have been a raised earth operation intended to bring the entire province to its knees. When he relaxes, his preference is still for the kind of humble establishment his grandmother used to run, a roadside sewa beer shop. One harrowing account given to Human Rights Watch describes Eritrean soldiers, identifiable from their distinctive plastic sandals, going from house to house in a Tigrayan town and murdering civilians. In one house they shot 2 children and left the mother alive, locking the door behind them so that she was trapped with their dead bodies for a day and a half. These unhappy youngsters have spent years in Sawa being brainwashed, being told by their commanders that all their problems are the fault of the Wayne, says Hebert. So when they were encouraged by their commanders to take revenge, they did. Isaias has always seen negotiation and diplomacy as a sign of weakness, says Connell, the expert on Eritrea. It's never been about give and take, with him. If you give, it's a sign of weakness. Under pressure from both Abiy and the outside world, Isaias has reluctantly pulled some troops out of Tigray, though fewer than the Ethiopian government claims, according to experts. Abiy is interested in a relationship with the West, while Isaias is not, says Connell. Abiy was incredibly naive, but he's beginning to understand who he is dealing with now. Asmara today is a very strange place. The few visitors who make it there often feel they have strayed into a picturesque postcard from the past, where carefully preserved Fiat 500s still putter slowly past trotting donkey carts. They can sip cappuccinos in the city's famous sink-top bars and pizzerias after taking part in the traditional evening passeggiata, stroll, a legacy of Italian colonialism. The Art Deco cinemas in this UNESCO-designated World Heritage Site still operate, even if the connection in the few internet cafes is so slow that would-be users often give up. One reason why so much has been preserved is that starting a new business in Asmara is extraordinarily hard. The Red Sea Trading Corporation smothers private competitors, and now runs even the small corner shops where Eritreans use ration cards to buy basic goods. The economy, as Isaias admits, is hand-to-mouth. For foreign exchange, the government depends on its gold and potash mines, and on an income tax levied on Eritreans living abroad, who are denied passports or permission to visit their families back home unless they pay it. As he approaches his 80s, Isaias can congratulate himself on having outlasted his rivals. Haile Selassie and Meles Zenawi are both dead. Mengistu is in exile. Yet while Isaias may still take pride in leading VIP visitors on walkabouts of Asmara, he fears for his own safety. An army lieutenant tried to shoot him in 2009, and a group of officers came close to initiating a coup in 2013. He swaps plates with subordinates when he eats out in restaurants, according to a leaked diplomatic cable. His tastes have changed little in all his time in power. When he relaxes, his preference is still for the kind of humble establishment his grandmother used to run, a roadside Suwa beer shop, where he drinks alongside laborers, peasant farmers and street sweepers, his bodyguards nervously waiting outside. There are no signs yet of Isaias slowing down or curbing his geopolitical ambitions. He has no sense of proportion, says Dawit Mesfin, a veteran opposition activist. Ethiopia is a vast country, 10 times bigger geographically than Eritrea, richer, more powerful, and with the support of the US. But Isaias has always thought he could control Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a vast country, 10 times bigger geographically than Eritrea, richer, more powerful, and with the support of the US. But Isaias has always thought he could control Ethiopia. Though Abiy is now forging a working relationship with the defeated TPLF, fighting erupted last month between his army and Amhara nationalist forces which regard Tigray's western region as historically theirs. Loyalty has never been an Isaias forte, and analysts suspect Eritrean troops are cooperating with these militia fighters, Abiy's former allies. The Abiy-Isaias bromance is fast frosting over. Isaias also sees an opportunity in closer ties with Putin. Eritrea was the only African country to vote against resolutions condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Isaias's reward was a visit from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, during which the two men discussed using an Eritrean port and airport as strategic transit points. The civil war in Sudan, Eritrea's other giant neighbor, offers plenty of meddling opportunities for outsiders, particularly those indifferent to the dangers of escalation. The best known are the mercenaries of Russia's Wagner Group, who have deep commercial ties to one of the warlords fighting for control of the country, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Ahmedti, the boss of a militia which carried out genocide in Darfur. But Isaias's role in Sudan may turn out to be even more important. In the past he has been close to Ahmedti. Yet this month he held closed-door talks with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Ahmedti's sworn enemy. Part of the reason Isaias might be tempted into fresh foreign adventures is that he needs to find something to keep busy the 250,000 troops who gained battlefield experience in Tigray. African regimes often struggle to reintegrate armies that have been encouraged to misbehave on foreign territory. There's virtually nothing for these youngsters to do back home in Eritrea. That's a very large force to be sitting kicking its heels in a very small country, says Sarah Vaughan, a Horn of Africa expert. It's a ticking time bomb.